Well, let's talk to Sir John Curtice, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University in Scotland. John, we're waiting for this official report into Downing Street parties and then the police investigation. It was a robust performance of Prime Minister's Question Time today. Do you think Boris Johnson will survive?
Well, I certainly don't rule the possibility out. I mean, clearly, at Prime Minister's Questions, particularly this week, also true of last week, the Prime Minister adopted the tactic of reminding the troops behind him of the various things that he believes he's achieved as Prime Minister, starting with Brexit, the vaccine rollout, what he now claims is the fastest growing economy in the G7, etc. And in a sense, decided not really to address, for the most part, the questions about Partygate that was coming from Sir Keir Starmer, but instead using it as an opportunity to, as it were, to try to demonstrate to his colleagues that he still retains the ability to be an effective potential campaigner in a general election. But at the end of the day, partly because of concerns about ethics and certainly also partly because of concerns about the interests of the party and indeed their own political careers, MPs, I think, when the Sue Gray report comes out, will be balancing what Mr. Johnson says are his attributes against two crucial considerations. First of all, to what extent, according to this report, was the Prime Minister involved in the various gatherings that seem to have taken place in Downing Street? And in particular, does his apparent claim that, whatever happened was certainly never something that he knew was going to happen. He was never part of any of the planning, etc. So that's one crucial question. How culpable is the Prime Minister directly for the various breaches that seem to have occurred? The second is, how honest has the Prime Minister been in the various accounts that he's given, particularly in the House of Commons, about what he did or didn't know? Remember, at the beginning of December last year, when this story first broke, with the video of his former press secretary, Allegra Stratton, trying to defend the gathering at the 20th of December in a mock press conference, that at that point he said, look, I've been given repeated assurances that, there weren't any parties, the rules were always kept to, etc., etc. Well, that line has certainly looked more capable of being attacked. And the question is whether or not, in fact, Sue Gray gives us any indication as to whether or not, in fact, the Prime Minister always knew that there were various gatherings whose relationship to the rules was perhaps always somewhat problematic.
For an international audience, Westminster politics can sometimes seem rather opaque. The Prime Minister can be replaced without an election by his own parliamentary party. Do you sense the ruling Conservative Party will dump him in what's called a confidence motion?
I think the honest truth is we don't know the answer to that question. I mean, so far, to get a vote of no confidence, we need 54 Conservative MPs to call for a ballot, and then a ballot is held, and it's the outcome of that ballot will depend on the Prime Minister's fate. At the moment, only 8 MPs, I think, have come out in public to say that the Prime Minister should stand down. And I think it's difficult at the moment to detect a tsunami of support for holding such a ballot. But the truth is, given those two criteria I've just given you, it's how MPs judge the Prime Minister's position against those two criteria when they see the report. And also, given that probably this is not going to be settled straight away, how the public react. Now, a lot of the reason why this is causing the Conservative Party trouble is that the public, including a significant section of those people who voted Conservative in 2019, voted for Boris Johnson, are saying that the Prime Minister should resign, that they doubt that he's been telling the truth. And as a result, also, support for the Conservatives in the polls has fallen. Now, what they'll be looking to see, because we'll get some instant polling, is what the public make of it. Are they confirmed? Do they even perhaps go further in their view that the Prime Minister wasn't telling the truth and that he should resign? Or does that mood begin to be reversed? Much could depend on that. If indeed the numbers become even worse for the Prime Minister in the wake of the Sue Gray report, then Conservative MPs might decide that this is going to be impossible for him to turn around, and that a man who undoubtedly was an electoral asset to the party in 2019 is now at risk of becoming a liability. If, on the other hand, the numbers start to move in his favour, then maybe they will feel that, like the Houdini of a politician that he's known to be, he's already begun to find the way out of the escape hatch.
And let's just say he is toast. Whom should we be watching as his replacement?
There are two front runners in the non-race that's going on so far. The first is Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is certainly the best known of the cabinet ministers, apart from Boris Johnson, but actually has not been in Parliament for, 4 years or so, relatively inexperienced, but certainly has demonstrated that he has what we would call in English the gift of the gab. He's a very effective public speaker and communicator. Principal rival, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who certainly seems to have been trying to promote herself with pictures of herself in tanks, which are rather similar to those of Margaret Thatcher. Although she voted Remain in the Brexit referendum, Mr. Sunak voted Leave, she seems to have been forgiven for that. She has embraced Brexit with a considerable degree of enthusiasm, and in her former role as the Secretary of State for International Trade has been responsible for negotiating quite a lot of the trade agreements that the United Kingdom has put in place as a result of its exit from the European Union and the fact that it's no longer part of trade relationships between the European Union and various other countries around the world.
John, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Mr. John Curtice, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University in Scotland.